I am going to record now. Welcome everyone who is listening to the recording. There will be lots of information still to come. There was a little bit in the earlier slides. Don't worry, the earlier slides will also be put up and you will be able to see a summary of everything that I said. But we are now officially starting the recorded portion. Apologies. So as I was saying, the pathways that we have available here at Albany High, there are three primary pathways. The standard grade level pathway has you going from Math 1 as a freshman to Math 2 and then Math 3. Those three are sort of the standard grade level 9th, 10th, and 11th grade math in the integrated curriculum. And then there are multiple places you can go afterward. If you are a student who is understanding, but still struggling to learn some of the things, especially in Math 3. Pre-calculus is a great place for you to shore up everything from Math 3 and expand beyond to prepare yourself for things like calculus if you wanted to do that in college. And so pre-calculus is one option. If you have excelled in Math 3 and you want to push yourself at the AP level, then you can go to AP Statistics, which is for students, frankly, who are not planning to go to STEM majors. Statistics is more useful for virtually all majors other than STEM because most of them require you to take a statistics class. So you can go to AP Statistics from Math 3. It is also possible to go to AP Calculus, AB, from Math 3. That is only if you do exceptionally well, like I would say a high A. But we do offer summer work that helps you bridge the gap and get from Math 3 to AP Calculus AB. And so there is that path. There is also the plus pathway, which I will spend a fair amount of time talking about tonight. The plus pathway, when you look at the chart, it looks like it's in the middle. And so the impression many families have is this is for, sort of middle of the road students. This is for your more average math students, which is not true whatsoever. I will talk about the children who are in this pathway. They are incredibly talented. And what it requires, if you're going to do it, is in 9th grade, you'll do the Math 1 class. You'll be in that class. You'll do all that curriculum. But we also have challenging plus tasks, tasks that ask you to go beyond what you have already learned and really fully fluently master the curriculum. And so you must do those. You must average an 85 or better. And then if you do, you can be recommended by your teacher to Math 2 plus. Math 2 plus and 3 plus cover all the same material as 2 and 3, but they do it at greater depth. There are some slight differences like law of sines and law of cosines. Those get covered in Math 3 plus. They don't get covered in Math 3 to much depth because those are things that are really critical for calculus, but are not critical for other sort of grade level expectation standards. And then after 3 plus, typically you would go to Calculus AB, but you can also go to AP Statistics. And I really encourage my students in Math 3 plus to think about what is the path you want to go on. As you go toward college, do you need calculus? Are you planning on taking STEM? Or are you not planning on being a STEM major and AP Statistics might actually serve you better long term? So those are the options for classes in the plus pathway. And here is where I will emphasize for the first time, these students are not middle of the road students. Of the 78 Math 3 Plus students last year who took the SBAC, 72 of them, so about 92%, scored above grade level standards, so a 4. Those students who are very strong, they are all over the place in the plus path. The other 6 students, they all scored at grade level. So there is no one who is below grade level in the plus track, and almost everyone is above grade level. So this is a path full of very, very strong students. It should not be seen as a lesser path. I would definitely put our plus students up against most schools' honors tracks. We push them very hard, but within reason, obviously. And part of that pushing is we push them to really fluently master all the foundations. So in Math 3 Plus, for example, you will have a number of tests that have no calculators because we're trying to prepare you for calculus where you will have to do things without calculators, but also just trying to build that fluency where you don't have to rely on the calculator to do multiplication and division for you, or even to do multiplication of small radicals, like square root of 2 times square root of 3, square root of 2 times square root of 6, things like that. So This plus track is more challenging than anything I had in high school. And I went to a high school that was, I would say, comparable to Albany in terms of where people ended up going afterward. And so you should think of this as a very significant level of challenge that pushes many, many talented students every year. And then the last pathway is the honors pathway. So I will talk more about Math 1, 2 in a little bit, but the honors pathway is packing 6 years of math into 4 years. The way our current system works, the way our current district curriculum works, you don't do any high school level math in middle school. The exception is you could have some people who do things outside of school, like going to Berkeley Math Circle, for example, and they may see things that are high school level before they get to high school. But for the most part, we have to, or for almost entirely, we have to plan for students to not have any of that high school exposure. So we need to get them through Algebra 1, Algebra 2, sorry, Math 1, Math 2, Math 3, Pre-Calculus, Calc AB, and Calc BC. And all of that in the span of 4 years, with the calculus part being the more challenging. So we are trying to front load to some degree the relatively easier things in Math 1, 2, and 3 to the first 2 years. So when you see Math 1, 2, it looks like one half. It's because you have Math 1 and half of Math 2. Math 2, 3 is the other half of Math 2, and then Math 3, plus actually a little bit of pre-calculus. And then in pre-calculus honors, you do pre-calculus and frankly, most of calculus AB. And then in calculus BC, you do calculus BC. You do the last part, the most difficult part of the calculus. And so that is very, very compressed. I will talk about that in more detail later, but it really is for students who are ready to focus fully in class, spend hours outside of class doing work, ideally with study groups, because it's very hard for one student to do this by themselves without getting some support outside of class. And so strong math ability is definitely necessary, because if you don't have that fluency, it's very, very difficult to go at the pace that this class goes in. But it is not sufficient. It is not enough that you be someone who is intuitive and fluent with math. Trust me, I know many students who get a lot of things intuitively, but they're not so interested in doing homework. They're not so interested in showing their work on tests. That is not what this path is for. This path is for students who are planning to do STEM, who feel that they need a full year of calculus in high school before they go up to college, and are ready to put in a lot of work freshman year to start that process. It is a really significant transition, far more than the already difficult transition to ninth grade Math 1. And so I want to emphasize here, and I will emphasize again later, Math 1, 2 should not be thought of as the place you go if you are good at math. It is a place where if you are talented at math, but also willing to work your butt off and intrinsically motivated to do it yourself, you will find success and learn things at a very, very high level of depth. So here is the slide that has all of the arrows. I've now talked about where sort of these arrows all go, but you see you have two options you can start with freshman year. Sophomore year, you then, if you are in Math 1, can go to Math 2 or to 2 plus if you completed the plus task sufficiently. And also Math 1, 2, which goes to the honors track. Please note, Math 1 does have an arrow going to accelerated Math 2, 3. As I will talk about a little bit more later, there is that possibility of a path. It does mean doing a lot of extra work the second semester of freshman year to catch up on all the Math 2 things that aren't being covered in your Math 1 class. But we do have, and we have Math 1 teachers and Math 2, 1, 2 teachers who can support you to try to do that in occasional cases where that is what makes sense for the student. So I'm not going to talk about this in much more detail because I've already gone through it, but you can reference this at any time, and we'll move forward to, all right. So now that we've talked about the pathways, let's talk about the expectations, things that all students should be aware of as they're coming in for ninth grade math here at Albany High School. So the transition is difficult. There is going to be more homework, not just in math class, but in all of your classes. So you will be expected to be doing more work outside of class for sure. You'll have 95-minute block periods 4 days a week. And so much of the time you will need to be able to sit and focus with brain breaks. We do build in breaks along the way, but much of the time you will need to be able to engage and practice in class because that is the most useful time that you can do that practice, and no retaking of summative tests. We'll talk about that. I will talk about that more as part of this slide and the next one. We are trying to ensure that students are able to build the habits they need to get where they ultimately need to go. And so that is where all of these standards are going to come from. That is why things work differently at the high school than they do the middle school. We see ourselves as a bridge between the more friendly, grade-friendly environment at middle school and the realities that you will face if you go to university or if you go to community college and want to potentially transfer to a university at some point. You need to start getting ready for the expectations that will help you learn all the material that you need, which is more. Math 1 has significantly more standards than eighth grade math. That's just how the California and the Common Core standards have been designed. There are roughly 30 or 40% more standards in Math 1 than there are in Math 8. So with that in mind, let's talk about different aspects of this. Homework. Homework will be graded based on completion and accuracy of correction. So students have had practice already in middle school. They've already been correcting their homework. The expectation is you are accurately and fully doing those corrections, including correcting your work. Don't just say, oh, I got the wrong answer. Now I will fill in the right answer in pen. Instead, you have to show the work that you did incorrectly. Go back and fix what you did, because that's how you learn from your mistakes, rather than just saying, oh, I made a mistake. I don't totally understand why, but here's the right answer, and then move on. That is not the point. And so there are definitely high standards, especially in ninth grade, because we want to get you started on the right foot. We want to get your expectations about homework started off on the right foot. Uh, I have this thing about copying answers. There are a fair number of students throughout Math 1, 2, and 3, and as well as in 2 plus and 3 plus sometimes as well, who will just copy answers. Don't do that. You are not building your own learning by copying answers. It is noticeable. It is something that we will give you very constructive feedback about. It is, I cannot say this enough, you are harming yourself. If you are trying to copy answers, homework is worth 10% of the grade in all of our Albany High math classes. So you're not improving your grade that much by doing the copying. Instead, you're really harming yourself when you come to the test and realize I haven't actually prepared. The test is going to be worth far more than that homework was. So please do the work. Summative assessments. So in many university level courses, as well as in things like SBAC, summative assessments are a reality of math, of how we determine whether someone has math fluency, not just understanding enough of an idea that they can sort of piece things together over time if they really needed to, but fluency in being able to, on demand, tackle these sorts of skills. And so these summative assessments are ones that we spend a lot of time preparing for. We have classwork, homework, we have group tests that are designed for, so all of these classes in the normal track, in the plus track, and the honors track, we have group tests that are designed to let you collaborate, figure out answers together, improve when you get the feedback, and then prepare yourself for the actual test. Often they will have things that are reflective of things that will be on the actual test or are helping you improve those skills. And so we have group tests. We also have chapter closure tasks that are designed for this. And I will note, although it's not written here, in accelerated classes, especially accelerated math 1, 2, we also have challenge tasks that are above and beyond the classwork that are there to help you prepare for the challenge level you might face on a test theoretically. So there is preparation for you. You just have to be ready to use it. And The challenge, so this negative cycles of catching up, the challenge when you are going at a fast pace, whether it's accelerated or not, there are more standards. And if you are constantly in a game of catch up where you haven't mastered previous things and you're focused on trying to make up those tests, you're missing out on the opportunity to practice the new material that you need. And it develops a very negative loop that ultimately we do not do test retakes in part for this purpose. The idea is you are learning over time. As I say here, the teachers, we will look at improvement over the course of the semester, and we will take that into account to figure out what your final grade should be. If you got a really bad grade early on, and then you show that you are learning it, and then you did well on the final, that will definitely be taken into account. But we don't do ongoing test retakes because we don't want to build the expectation that in college, for example, yes, I can take a test. I might not be able to fully understand it, but it's okay. There will be opportunities to redo it. Unfortunately, in most programs, that won't be the case, and we want to prepare you for that reality. So you're not blindsided by it when it's harder. We try to front load these things so that you get exposure to it earlier on when grades matter a little bit less in ninth grade, and when it's not as challenging material as it will be later on in high school and in college. All right. So, in-class debriefs, we do hold those after each test. This is my opportunity to make sure everyone who is here is aware we don't allow students to take tests home. The biggest reason for this, especially in this technology era, is once a test goes home, it's out there in the public. People can take pictures, they can send it to each other. We can't reuse that test or even a like modified version really of that test, like with numbers changed or anything like that in future years because they are out there and people may send them to each other. Tutors may get access to them and use them to specifically help the students who are able to pay for tutors, which is an equity issue, as I'll talk about. So ultimately, we do not let students take home tests. They are, of course, free to come in during advisory to review their test, free to come in at agreed upon times with other teachers. They can do it during class if necessary. In addition to, we all go through it in class as part of the debrief. And there are sheets where you get to fill out what you did well, what you need to improve on. But every other material can be taken home. The summative tests are the only things that cannot be taken home, and that is our policy across the math department. And yeah, so here's where I emphasize it is very hard to make good summative assessments. It's especially hard for accelerated classes where we're trying to make challenge. And so the amount of time it would take for us to develop new tests and then test them out and see, oh, this is actually something that was confusing for the students. I should modify it in this way. It wouldn't work if we let the tests go out every year and then effectively had to rewrite tests the next year with new material and new types of questions and new ways of finding challenge. And then, yes, here is the equity issue. As I mentioned, when it goes home, it can go to tutors. We definitely don't like tutors seeing our tests because then they will help the students that they are tutoring specifically prepare for those tests. It's similar to the equity issues that are exist around the SAT and ACT and any other standardized testing where there are stakes and therefore certain families that have more money may be able to help their students in ways that we are trying to fight against that inequity, not fuel it. As mentioned, so supporting our struggling math students. First, as I say here, there's no shame in struggling in math. We all have things that we are better at and things that we are worse at. And for the most part, there are no like massive stigmas around many different skills that people lack. So I can't cook. I am really terrible at drawing, as my students have seen. We do drawing competitions and I lose. But no one makes fun of me about that. No one thinks that I'm lesser in some way because I can't do those things. Whereas in math, there is a lot of stigma historically involved with struggling at it, feeling like, oh, math is what shows whether you're smart or not. So if you don't do well at math, you must not be smart. That is not true. It is just one of many skills. It is one that is valuable, especially economically, in our society. And so that's why it gets emphasized and why we want to empower students with it. But that does not mean that it is fundamentally more important. And so what I would say to students who are being encouraged to do Math 1 support, it's not a stigma. It doesn't mean a bad thing if you are doing Math 1 support. It's there to help you get to a place where you don't need that support anymore and you're able to do all the grade level tasks without struggling grade wise. And you are able to show by the end of high school that you are ready for college and all of those expectations. That is what it is designed for. And so it is an extra period. So it is part of the schedule. I know there's already been the course selection process. And so some students and families may feel attached to the schedule that was already put together, or the draft schedule they put together. I would really, really encourage anyone who is recommended for Math 1 support to please take that support. We want to help you. We want to put you in a position where you grow out of that support by sophomore year and you're nailing all of it by yourself. But that is there because we have students who come in, as I mentioned, that may be below grade level. We want to help them get to the place where they gradually move out of that space and into a space where they feel confident they can handle the grade level expectations. And as I mentioned, historically, we don't always get the number of students there that we would like to get. So please, reach out to me with any questions if you have them. But I would love for the people who are recommended to participate and get the benefit of that. We'll have a teacher and multiple peer tutors available to give that support to those students. And yes, sorry, should not forget, Math 2 support also exists for 10th grade students. So if you go through Math 1 support and you still end up in a space where you may need some more support, or if you didn't, you did Math 1 and you struggled in Math 1, Math 2 support is there for those students to help them get from 10th grade to 11th grade to a place where they're ready for Math 3 and don't need that extra support. All right, additional challenge in Math 1. So first of all, it's already challenging. As I said, it is already a significant change in expectations when you're already balancing all these new expectations in ninth grade. So it's already hard enough as it is, but we also add the plus tasks and challenges for students who are ready to push themselves beyond and are interested in pursuing that plus path. They will be tasks that you do at home. There will also be a portion of the tests, especially as you go on toward the second semester. Every test will have some portion that is plus questions. And if you want to participate in Math 2 Plus, you will need to do those questions and they will be factored into your grade. So while there is only one class happening, Math 1, there are a bit of different standards being applied depending on whether you're taking the 1 plus path or the one path within that class. By the way, fractions, decimals, some of these foundations that students learn about earlier, having fluency in them is really important to being able to do higher level tasks because higher level tasks require you to use a bunch of previous skills. And if you don't know those fluently, then it's much slower. You have to piece things together much more. And so ultimately, that is a really important aspect of all the levels of the plus is you're really building that fluency on things that some people can find more tricky, including things like fractions. Extra homework for Math 1 Plus is being asked in the comments, and that's what I'm talking about when I say the 1 Plus tasks. Those are things that you do not just as part of classwork, but beyond in your homework. You are asked to do extra things. You're asked to do extra problems that push you beyond in your fluency. And then, as I mentioned, there is a possibility to go from Math 1 to Accelerated Math 2, 3. Because Math 1, 2 is covering half of Math 2, that means in the second semester of your freshman year, you'll have to do a lot of catch-up where you learn those extra things. However, because the Math 1, 2 students are doing all of their Math 2 learning in the second semester, we often have students who will basically audit. They'll sit in on Math 1, 2 and learn the Math 2 material with their ninth grade peers in the hopes of going to Math 2, 3. This is something that only happens on a very limited basis. I would say on average about 1 to 2 students per year will follow that path. So I don't want to set an expectation that it's by any means easy, but it is something that is theoretically possible for students who show that they're really ready and willing to work their butts off. Moving on. Okay. So, Math 1-2 considerations. There's probably a fair number of people who are here who are at least thinking about Math 1-2. And so there are going to be a few slides here where I talk about this. So again, I would strongly disagree with the idea that this is the class you go to if you are good at math. That is not necessarily true. The plus track is another place where lots of excellent math students go. The purpose of the 1-2 path, the honors path, is to allow students to get to STEM majors at potentially elite universities and not be at a disadvantage. If anything, hopefully have a leg up because they're building a very strong foundation up front. They are learning all of the ideas from Math 1, Math 2, Math 3, and calculus fluently and in depth, and that is their expectation in what they are going to be expected to do in class and how they're expected to be relaying that information to their teacher. It's not just learning the concepts. The concepts and fluency in the concepts is important, critically important, but you also need to learn how to communicate those ideas to other people, clearly organize your work in a way that someone else would be able to understand, because these are critical skills that you will need as you're doing college applications, as you're doing projects with others, both in high school and beyond. So it's not just a matter of mastering concepts in this path. We do strongly emphasize the communication of those ideas as well. And so, what does it take to succeed in our honors track? It takes ability. You do need to come in having a very strong foundation in all of the middle school concepts. It also takes a very strong work ethic. You need to be ready to do a very significant amount of work, both in class and out of class, to keep up with the pace and learn all of the depth that you need. And you really should be intrinsically motivated. You should be wanting to do this on your own. We do have kids every year who do Math 1-2 because their parents felt that it would be a good challenge and they're hoping that they could do it for their parents. Ultimately, those students struggle because they're not motivated. And at a certain point, it becomes so much that they say, you know what, I just don't want to do this right now. And then it's that negative cycle of you're always trying to catch up and you don't really feel like doing that level of work yourself. So I would say this path is really for students who know upfront, I like doing this. It's not just I feel like I'm good at it. I like doing it. I'm willing to put in the work. I'm willing to communicate my ideas. I'm willing to show my work. These are things that some students who are very strong at math don't necessarily like or want to do, as I see every year. And so this is where I emphasize the self-motivation. I will also say, and this is a brief addition to what's here on the slides, but I know this sort of student that is like really strong at math, but doesn't necessarily want to show their work, doesn't like doing all of the homework, gets, a little bit bored if they feel like something feels too easy, but then maybe eventually discovers, oh, actually, I didn't fully master that thing because I said I was bored and I only actually got the basic version of it, not the harder versions. I know this student particularly well because I was this student. That is definitely how I was when I was in basically everything until senior year of high school. As I tell my students, that is a terrible time for you to figure out that working hard makes sense. You should do that at least junior year, if not earlier. But I have definitely been in those shoes. And so I will just say for all the students who feel like they are built different, they just get stuff and it's no big deal. Everyone has their limits. I had a limit. When I did calculus, I was a sophomore. I did calculus BC sophomore year of high school, and I got a B minus and then a C plus, which was by far the worst grades I had ever gotten in math because I wasn't doing the homework. I was kind of goofing off in class a lot, and I hit a point where I couldn't just do it all on intuition. And that's in my school where things were not as challenging as our honors track. Everyone hits a limit at some point. And by the way, I was able to eventually do extremely well at a place like UC Berkeley, and it's not a sign that you are bad if you can't just do it all based on doing no work. Everyone gets to that point. So please come into ninth grade understanding you are not built in a fundamentally different way from everyone else in a way that allows you to just do none of the work and still be able to get everything. You got to do work. Everyone who's done something great had a lot of upfront skill, but they worked their butt off with it. And that's the message I try to send. All right, I will talk about the summer homework in a little bit, but first I want to get through the remaining material. There's not too much left in the slides, so sorry. I know it's been a lot. So I want to emphasize having students who sign up for Math 1-2 who ultimately are not ready for it is a historical problem that causes issues here at the high school, which I'll talk about, but also causes issues for families and students themselves. The last year, so not this year's ninth grade class, but last year's ninth grade class, we had 75 kids who were in Math 1-2 at the beginning of the year. Uh, Out of those 75 kids, only 38 were still in the class at the end of the semester, the first semester. Only 31 were actually still in the class at the end of the year. And of those, only 26 were recommended and moved on to Math 2-3. Obviously, that is far, far, far too many kids who are moving from Math 1-2 to Math 1, feeling like, oh, maybe I'm not as good at math as I thought I was, which is not necessarily true. It's not about how good at you are at math. It's about how much you were willing to work day one when you got into ninth grade, which is different for different people. And so that is, I think, a very, very negative outcome from our perspective for those students and their experience and their families' experience. It's also very negative for all the other students in Math 1 as well, because when those students need to move from Math 1-2 to Math 1, they have to go to the existing Math 1 classes. We can't create a new section of a class because a bunch of students have moved and now want to be in that class. And this is a historical problem, not just in the honors pathway, but also the plus pathway some years. If there are too many students trying to do a class that they're not ready for, it can lead to really overcrowded classes in the grade level track where we would love to give our attention the most. So this is a historical problem that existed before I started at Albany High and through my years in Albany High before this year. So this year, we have implemented the testing process. I am very happy to say that I was pushing for this process and for all of the tests that we developed and all the thresholds that we used, all the data analysis that we've done around it has been one of my focus areas. And so we had 3 tests. One is the AMC, one is the MDTP, and one is the regular, the previous criteria. The previous criteria was just based on your grade in 8th grade math. So if you had a 95 or above on the mastery check-ins, the tests, and if you had a 90 or above in the critical thinking challenges, that was the only threshold. If you met those, then you would be in. Now there are 3, and you have to meet 2 of those 3 to be recommended to the program. This year, since it was our first year doing it, we did allow families to appeal, and they were allowed to join the Math 1, the students were allowed to join Math 1-2, even if they didn't meet those criteria. But as we'll talk about in just a second, I would definitely caution people against doing that. So this year, using those placement criteria, we had 51 students rather than 75 who started the year. Before we get to like where all those numbers went, please also keep in mind, because of budget limitations, it is very, very unlikely that we would ever have more than 2 sections of Math 1-2, because we want to have as many sections of Math 1 as possible so that there are not bloated class sizes in those classes where students need the most support. And so last year when we had 75, that's a class of 40 and a class of 35 that existed. Whereas this year we had 51. So it was a little bit unbalanced because 7th period is when all the band kids take band, and we had a ton of band kids this year. But still, it was 20 and 31. 31 is not as big as 35 or anywhere close to as big as 40, but 20, that is such a manageable class size. And so that does factor into the experience for everyone. When you have fewer kids, it also means that the ones who are ready and willing to engage are able to do so with each other. And so we had 47 of the 51 were able to complete the first semester. 43 will be finishing out the full year. And of those 43, we currently have 39 who have been recommended to the next level. So that's a total of only 8 students who will have moved from Math 1-2 to Math 1 this year. Out of those 8 students, 6 of them were students who did not meet the placement criteria. So they petitioned to Principal McNally. They were allowed into the class. Unfortunately, it was very, very difficult compared to what they were hoping and prepared for. And so because of struggling grades, we worked with them to find a good Math 1 class for them to go to so that they would be able to work on it during freshman year, get to the plus track, and get to a place where they're still going to do calculus as seniors. The other 2 moved before we took the first test. These were students who both had after-school sports, and when they saw how much work was required, and maturely said, I am not ready to commit this amount of time outside of school, so I am going to move to Math 1. That means we didn't have a single person who met these placement criteria who left the class because of grade issues, because they were struggling to get the grade that they were hoping to get. That is a massive, massive improvement from my perspective. And so from my perspective, these tests and this process is working. I will let you know, as a very math person, we're not just saying, okay, it worked, and then we move on. I am continuing to analyze the data this year. I have done R-squared analysis of all of our criteria, the mastery check-ins, the critical thinking challenges from 8th grade, the MDTP, and the AMC. And I've also done multiple linear regression using combinations of those to determine which are showing to be the most effective and least effective. I will say the most effective so far has been the MDTP. It had an R-squared of about 0.56, which means about 56% of the variability in your Math 1-2 grade could be explained by variability in your score on the MDTP, which is much higher than I thought it would be, to be honest. But both the MCIs and the AMC are also good indicators. They had R-squareds. The AMC was 0.32, and the MCIs was 0.28, so not as high, but still excellent data. And so we will continue to use those. I know I have not announced what the cutoffs will be for this year. That will come out shortly, but we do have a few people who will be completing the makeup for the AMC shortly. So after that, we will announce what those cutoffs are. Again, emphasizing you have to meet 2 of those 3. So even if you don't meet one of the 3, you will still be recommended for Math 1-2 if you choose to take it, but we'll identify, hey, this is the thing that you didn't meet. That means you should probably work on this. If it's AMC, you should probably work on your challenge level problems. If it's MDTP, there's foundational information in the middle school material that you haven't yet mastered. Make sure to practice and focus on that. And if it's the MCI, it's more likely you need to make sure you're doing work, you're doing your homework, you're engaging, because in the MCIs and in the 8th grade material, you are allowed to do things like retakes. And so you should be able to achieve a reasonably high grade as long as you're willing to put in the effort and really engage in class. All right, so I think we're near the end of my material. Yes, we will continue to refine the data, and that is the end of the prepared portion of this. I've noticed there have been a few questions coming in, mostly in the tail end here. So I'm going to now start touching on those questions. If you want to send additional questions as I go through these, please feel free, because I will start with the ones that were asked the earliest, and then I will keep scrolling down. And hopefully it won't take a crazy amount of time, but it's the first time, so we will have to see. What is the material covered in our summer homework? So that material will get sent out later on in the year, around May, usually. Generally speaking, it's things that are not covered in the middle school curriculum standards, but we feel would be very important and useful for students to practice, whether it's specific aspects of lines and the interaction of lines with each other, or things like simplifying radicals, like square root of 2 times the square root of 6, turning that from the square root of 12 into 2 times the square root of 3. These are some of the skills that are very basic building blocks of what you will ultimately need in Math 1-2. And so we do try to layer those things in. I will also say the full detail of what will be covered in the summer homework is also not completely definitive yet. This is my first year teaching Math 1, 2, so it'll be my first time seeing the whole way through. Uh, Therefore, it's my first time getting to make suggestions on what we give for the summer homework. So it may be that we do a little bit more preparation for what is in the first chapter or the first couple of chapters. I do also have potential ideas, which again, this is all preliminary. I haven't had a chance to fully do this because I've been focusing on my regular job plus doing all of this. But I would love to get to a place where we have a test for the material that's in the summer homework that we give to the students. They have access to it. They have access to a rubric so that they can test themselves and then grade themselves as if they were the teacher based strictly on the rubric and see what it's like. What is it like to get graded under a strict rubric so that they don't come into Math 1, 2, take their first test and be like, oh my God, I can't believe I made these like small mistakes and somehow I got a 3 out of 5 on this question because my answer ended up being not what the answer is supposed to be. Remember, the point of this is to build you gradually. We give plenty of partial credit, but ultimately you're going to a place where you're not going to get credit for answers that are incorrect, whether it's on an AP test or in college courses. Much of the time, you really need to have a correct answer to get most of the credit. So we're giving partial credit, but I want people to see what these rubrics really look like and feel like, ideally during the summer, rather than seeing it for the first time when they are freshmen. All right, I talked about the rates for this year. Is there a difference between the two teachers this year? Well, I'm one of the two teachers this year, and I would say there is not a difference in the way we are teaching it because I am going purely off of Mr. Rasband's notes. Not because I don't understand the material, but because I want to make sure I'm teaching it the way he teaches it, because we're also using the tests that he's put together historically. We are also using the rubrics that he's put together historically. So I'm following all the same processes, using all the same materials, all the same grading that Mr. Rasband is. So from my perspective, there's not difference in what is being taught or particularly how it's being taught. I will say there's probably some moments where I'm probably doing a little bit too much. I can't help myself sometimes. I want to go beyond and show you where you're going with these things, how they're going to connect to more advanced things. So I probably do have some kids from time to time in my class who may be a little bit annoyed at me that I talk too much. But other than that, we're going through the material the same way. What is the best approach from the school to deal with the point you just touched on, having a lot of students moving from Math 1, 2 to Math 1? Because students should totally be allowed to try. They are growing up. They're not grown-ups. The school should be ready for those moves based on experience. So I totally understand that concept and frankly, it's one that we share as a department. We do want to give people opportunities to try things out, push themselves, and then potentially figure out that, okay, maybe this wasn't actually what made sense for me. The problem is, and if you can find a way to make it work with Principal McNally and the district office to be able to change the number of course sections during the year, then that would definitely help this problem. But absent changing the number of sections, the unfortunate reality is if you get a bunch of students, a lot of students who are moving levels during the year, you're going to end up with classes that are much larger than you originally anticipated. And that's just not fair to anyone. So we're not talking about saying no one can try it unless you definitely are going to stay for the entire year. Obviously, we still have students who move to Math 1. But what we can't have is have really significant numbers of students doing that. That's where it becomes unmanageable and untenable. We know from experience there will always be some students who need to move, and that's okay. We just can't have far too many. Okay, father of 3, Cal astrophysics professor here with direct experience with one kid already through this program, and I'm exhausted by the weed out mentality on display in AHS math. I strongly feel that you need to give families and students the autonomy to choose their path. So I think we are trying to do that. In terms of the weed out mentality, I'm not entirely sure what that would be in this particular context of what I've been talking about, but yeah, we're not trying to push anyone out. I will tell you, having now taught this Math 1, 2 for the first time, it's very much on the other side of things. There are so many materials. There is so much effort that has been put into giving kids exposure to as much as possible so that they can choose what path they take to learning the material. It's not intended to actually like push people out. We're trying to keep people in. The problem is if you are not ready for the standards that are being applied, it gets hard after the first few tests to get to a place where you have the grade that you want. Some of the pushback I would say is, yes, there are parents who say we want to let our kids try. They're not grown-ups yet, but they should be given an opportunity. But some of those same parents, when their students are getting a B or even worse, a C or way worse, a D, they are then saying, I'm not okay with this. They should be getting a good grade. My student has always been good at math. Why are they getting this grade? And so it is a balance. Trust me, you can see how much effort I'm putting into this. I did 45 extra minutes in back to school night this year just for the math 1-2 parents because I knew they would have tons of questions about how things have been going. There is so much effort and care being put into the whole program. And that includes students who are struggling as well. We can't focus all the attention on the most accelerated tracks. But I am trying to emphasize the point here today that we're paying attention to both. We are doing our best to also give those opportunities for people to accelerate. And even if they don't do the honors track, they are getting an amazing opportunity in the plus track to still be fantastic math students and go off and set curves in their classes in UCs. So 1 to 2, 3, so non-existent. Okay, I think that's part of the same question. And yes, I would say, as I emphasized, Math 1 to Math 2, 3 is a very narrow. Like you should expect if you really want to do the honors track, you should start in Math 1, 2. I'm just trying to caution that Math 1, 2 is a lot sometimes for freshmen. So be aware that is the case. What's MDTP? So that is a test that was developed by the UC system. It's actually, when I say it's a test, there's actually a bunch of tests, but the one that we focus on is the 9th grade math readiness test. They specifically designed that one because there's California law requiring you to do placement process going into 9th grade. So they made a special one just for how ready are you for 9th grade math? Ultimately, having taken it myself, it's really like it's not challenge. It is, do you know the 8th grade material fully? Like, here are 2 points. Find the slope of the line connecting those 2 points. It's 40 questions. I took it myself ahead of time last year to prepare and see what kids were doing. I finished the 40 questions in 4.5 minutes. And that's just like, I got a perfect score. Like it's not something where there's a lot of like, ooh, let me think about that one for a second. It's if you know the content, it's boom, 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 boom. Some of the students I know were completing it in 10 minutes or less, even not going through their work and actually checking themselves. So it is, if you understand the concepts, you're totally fine. People ask about preparing for the MDTP. You don't need to prepare for the MDTP other than paying attention in middle school math. If you know all of those content standards, you are good. A significant portion of the students who are in Math 1-2 this year got 100, and most of the rest got a 98. So don't stress about that as a test, is what I would say. Appreciate that you're doing this, but a lot of people are wondering about the elephant in the room. Ooh, an elephant. I wish an honest conversation about the difference between this year and last year would include not only the test, but the fact that half the students had a different teacher this year. So I will just slight clarification, more than half of the students had a different teacher this year because I didn't know this ahead of time that giving myself fifth period would mean I would get all the band kids, but I'm the one who got the class that had 30, which sadly is not like, I know people in the community might think that's a good thing. Like it was not the best thing in the world. You would rather have the teacher who has a ton of experience doing this class, having more of the kids, but I have totally made it work. It has been very stressful, I will tell you, trying to learn all the different parts that go into this class. But ultimately, I can't emphasize enough. We are doing the same teaching. Yes, I may be bringing a different energy in the classroom, but that doesn't mean that I'm actually teaching the material differently or giving different expectations. Ultimately, I would say the placement process has made it so that we have a class size that is more manageable. And it's so different having students who are universally ready. They're ready to kick butt. They're ready to do a bunch of work. They're working together so much. And the ones who didn't, they learned, I have to do that. And then they went and they did it. They found their study groups. It's been amazing this year. So anyway, I hope to continue to be helpful, but I will say it's not like I magically change things by just being a good teacher. If a Math 1 student takes the Math 1 plus path, will their grade be penalized if they don't do the extra work? So you basically have to choose, especially second semester in particular. You have to choose whether you're going to do the plus track. And if you are going to do that, you do need to do the work. It is built into part of your grade. It's not the majority of your grade, but yes, your grade will be impacted if you're not doing the work that you signed up to do. That being said, it's not like you decide day one of the second semester and then it's locked in forever. You would definitely have to do the plus path, the end. If you decide ultimately that I've seen what this plus stuff is about, I actually don't think I want to do this, there is still the opportunity, even during the second semester, to say, you know what, I'm not going to go down the plus path, and you will no longer have to do those parts. But ultimately, you do if you want to do the plus track, you do need to do it, and your grade will be affected if you don't do certain aspects of that. My student will most likely be recommended for Math 1 support. Is he automatically assigned? Great question. No, you are not automatically assigned. It is an opt-out process that we are pursuing this year. So I think we are working to have you put in that class, but you have the ability to opt out of it if you so choose. Generally, the opt-out for something like support is something where we want the family, not just the students, to be doing the opting out. So that would be something where you would need to be involved as a parent if they were going to opt out. It looks like you want them to be part of it. So that is fantastic. But yeah, it's generally we're trying to pursue an opt-out rather than an opt-in model this year because, as I said, we do want to get more kids in there and involved and taking advantage of that support. Good question. Is there a difference in the dropout rate between the two classes? So the two students who dropped before the first test because they were both in sports, they were not in my class. So that is random chance. Frankly, I talked to both of them and they didn't really feel like they wanted to be in Math 1 2 in the first place because of sports. And so I would say that has nothing to do with anything other than that's where those people landed. The others, I have a slightly higher rate, but that's because I did have a slightly higher percentage of my students who were opt-in, who were students who their parents, not opt-in, who were appeals, who didn't meet the placement requirements, but were placed in the class anyway because they appealed. So I had twice as many of those students, but that's just part of how the numbers shake out sometimes. So yeah, from my perspective, there is not an overall difference other than one class, my class, had more of the students who had wavered in, and his class had the two students who, because they were doing sports, and again, he's also seventh period, so that I'm sure factored into their thinking some as well. You have to miss seventh period for sports. We will not. I'm pushing for us to not have seventh period Math 1 2 next year, but unfortunately, this is my first year as department chair, so the, and I kind of got thrown into it in July. So I was just figuring out what is the right schedule, and that was one aspect of the schedule that happened this year that I would like to change. Is there a STEM college application disadvantage without Calculus BC? So, from my perspective, if you are applying to STEM, especially if you're applying to a four-year university that's competitive, I believe there is an advantage to doing Calculus BC when you're in high school. Generally speaking, there are so many kids who are doing that at this point, and frankly, kids who are pushing themselves even beyond Calculus BC because they feel like this is the way to get your edge, especially in a world where the SAT and ACT are emphasized less. Yes, I do feel that there is a disadvantage, and that's why I say if you're planning on doing STEM and you want to go to a competitive school, push yourself to do Math 1 2 if at all possible. Like, I recognize that you're not necessarily ready for the work level and it may be a big adjustment for you. But the nice thing is, while ninth grade is a big adjustment, there's no other classes where you're doing accelerated. Math is the only one at Albany High where you can actually accelerate your freshman year. So if you really want to do that, and I'm talking to the students now, if you want to get yourself to STEM in college, definitely try to pursue the honors track, but be ready to work your butt off when you get there. Yeah, Yes, I agree. That is a better thing to do. One thing we noticed with our older kid, who was good at math, works hard, and succeeded in math one too, was that the summer homework and homework were very easy. There seemed to be a disconnect between the classwork and homework and the level at which the testing happened. So I wanna address this because I think this is a very, very good point. Some of it I would disagree with slightly, as I will explain. Some of which, especially the summer homework part, I particularly want to work on. That's why I say things like I would love to incorporate things that are more challenging, but also a test of what you're learning, where you see a rubric that looks like what you're going to see in the class. The part I would disagree a little bit about is the homework. Yes, there are homework problems that are easier. Those are the retrieval problems in particular, but also a lot of the ready, set, go problems that you have to do. They're having you like build the fluency by getting repeated practice. They're not really pushing you to do super challenging versions of it. But on the Google Drive, the share drive that is shared with all of the students, there's not just the regular homework. There's also challenge tasks, additional tasks. It's been a real learning process for me seeing all the stuff that's been prepared to help students get ready for tests. And it's not just those homework assignments. So what I would say is that part of the homework, yes, I would agree that's not going to be the same level of difficulty. That's meant to be like repeated practice, which frankly, Mr. Rasman and I, with his encouragement, we've been trying to like whittle that down a bit so they're not doing all of the retrieval and RSG problems every time because we know the repeated practice can get a little bit tedious when you're asking them to also do challenge. But really make sure your student does the challenge tasks, the take-home tasks. These are the things that are designed to be more like what you would see on a test. They are present in the class, they are available, and we encourage the students to do it. But sometimes the students just be like, oh, I'm used to doing my CPM homework from middle school. So this RSG and retrieval, that's the homework. That's what I do to prepare. And no, that is just a part of the preparation process. But there are other materials that are available that they really should practice and do. Okay, oh no. Sending me a private message, so I will read that and I won't read it out loud. Hopefully, none of the other ones I've read have been private messages. I didn't really look to see whether it said direct message. So all right. Our son breezed through Math 8 Challenge at AMS. Math 1-2 is very challenging and rigorous. He has worked really hard to stay in Math 1-2 and enjoys it. The biggest learning curves are around the amount of studying and how to study, doing practice problems, getting help and advisory, going to after school math hour, getting a private tutor. All of those things are fantastic. I would say a private tutor is not necessarily necessary. Certainly, if you're working with other students and have a good study group, you shouldn't feel like you need a tutor if you find some struggle early on, although it certainly can be helpful as well. But I have this student and it's been fantastic. I think my memory might be slightly incorrect here, but I think he joined a little bit late. So not we did have a few students who started the second week of school because originally they wanted to do Math 1 and they decided, oh, this is too easy. I'll challenge myself. And so there was a bit of a catch-up learning curve. But yeah, once you figure it out for yourself, it's fantastic. I was actually considering doing a slide where I showed some trajectories of students, so you could see the different sorts of things that can happen in Math 1-2 and not get discouraged if you're not seeing what you're looking for up front. I had one student, or there was one student this year, first test grade was a 72. This is a student who has like always gotten A's and like perfect scores on as many things as possible. So a 72 is a real wake-up call, and then gradually getting used to the expectations, 87, 88 on the next two tests, and then 94, and then 104 and a 98, like really figured out how it worked and was able to excel in a way that he was so proud of. He was so proud of himself for being able to work through this and figure out how to deal with new challenges. I had another student who started off at an 80, a higher score, and then gradually was going down to like 70 and then 60 and then 56. And the student, she came to me multiple times and said, should I drop? Like, I feel like I should drop. It's clearly showing me that I can't do this. And I said, honestly, seeing all of your work, you can do very complicated things. You just seem to have like a shaken sense of faith in yourself right now. If you focus and push yourself, work with students outside of school, because you're not doing that as much as you probably should, you can find your groove. You can find a way to do this. And it's been so wonderful to see her stick with it, go from an F on a test to up to a B, A, like the look on someone's face when they've gotten an A, when they thought that they couldn't even do this class, and they did really well on the midterm, and it's like the summative, really hard test they thought was going to be crazy hard, and they were able to kill it. Like, it's not necessarily true that your trajectory will just be one way. So the kids who do go into Math 1, 2, I really encourage, don't stop when you feel like it's getting too hard. The only ones I've encouraged to think about moving to Math 1 is where it's like a really consistent level of Fs, but also where they're showing and they're talking to me. They're like, I don't want to do this. I don't like this. This is too much work. I just don't feel like this is for me. That's where I'll say, okay, if you feel like it's not for you, that's the ultimate issue. So anyway, yes, I am not naming any names, but all of these students have been very nice stories for me this year. What non-school support programs would you recommend? Khan Academy, tutors, etc. That's a really good question. Khan Academy does have a lot of free material, which is totally it's good material. There's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. I do find that it can be a lot, like you have to kind of go through a lot to get real practice in sufficient amount. And so what I like, first of all, Math 1 support. I strongly encourage using Math 1 support for students who need that support. We also have Math Hour 2 days a week after school. I would strongly encourage students to do that as well. We have advisory. That is time that should be used. I've talked about study groups because it's really strongly emphasized for Math 1, 2 students, but that's really true of everyone. Everyone freshman year should form study groups, whether it's for math or for multiple subjects. You should be practicing with other people because very few people can just do it all alone on their own. And if they can, that probably means they're not at a big enough challenge level for themselves yet. So the other support besides like tutors where you're paying an adult to do it, there are plenty of very strong students, kids who your kids are friends with. Have them work together. My son meets with his friends every Sunday. They meet at the library. They go through practice problems. They design some of their own problems. They try to figure out what would a challenge version of this be, and then they just make the problems for themselves, and then they give it to each other, and then they grade each other. Like all of these things can be done outside of school that don't require, paying an adult to be the support as well. Yes, not seventh period. I very much agree. Sorry, there's multiple periods this year where I was like, I wish someone had just told me that this would be this kind of problem. But now I know for next year when I'm making the schedule that these are things to avoid. What is the average grade on the tests in the class? Good question. We generally don't, or I should say, we generally don't. I often do, and other teachers tell me that I shouldn't. So I'm not sure how much I should talk about that because I don't know. I guess it can cause some problems, but I usually end up talking about it for the most part anyway. In Math 1, 2, the grades are typically a B average. Bs are from 75 to 85. So we've had some tests that have been rough and the average has been closer to like 77, 78. We've had some tests that have been better and have been averages that were above 80, like 81, 82. And so, yeah, in Math 1, 2, it's generally a B average. You do have some scores that are lower, but typically that's not happening on a like repeated basis for students. There are some who have lower scores, but they're usually then improving and learning from it. And so it's not consistently low. What is Math Hour? Good question. 1 hour after school, 2 days a week. This year it's Monday and Tuesday. Some years it's Tuesday and Thursday. It kind of, or Monday and Thursday. It varies. But 2 days a week, we have multiple adults, multiple math teachers who are in either, so this year it's in room 308, last year was in the library. Hopefully next year it will be in the library again. And we just do problems with people. Kids come in, they sign in, and they ask questions. They work together, they ask questions of the teacher. You have multiple people there who can answer questions. And so that's Math Hour. It's extra math support that's available every week. Will there be summer homework? For 8th grade, yeah, there is summer homework to prepare for 9th grade Math 1, 2. There's not summer homework to prepare for Math 1. You are certainly free to look at material to help yourself get prepared for 9th grade in any way you see fit, but we don't feel that there's summer homework necessary to prepare for Math 1. Does Math 1, 2 often result in a lower GPA freshman year? I mean, that's kind of a challenging question to fully flesh out because it's you have to like figure out what would this student have gotten in an alternative scenario. It's harder. So I think by definition, it kind of has to result in either an equal or lower GPA freshman year, because if you are getting an A in Math 1, 2, you're almost certainly going to get, you're beyond certainly going to get an A in Math 1, but getting an A in Math 1 doesn't necessarily mean you would have gotten an A in Math 1, 2. So it's more challenging for sure. And so the chance of getting a lower grade is definitely higher. But in my experience, the grades are generally a vast majority of A's and B's. There are a few C's, and we work on it, and we try to get to a place where it's not a C. But to me, freshman year is the time, like, to get to an earlier parent's point about letting these kids try stuff out. Let them try it out. Let them get a C. That's okay. It's just freshman year. It's not going to be like, oh, you're never going to be able to get into school now because you got a C in this honors math path. Let them try it out. Just be willing to be okay with the idea that they won't necessarily get an A when they're trying out the things that they want to try out. On average, how much homework per night? In regular, in Math 1, I would say from my expectations, it's only certain days because we have block periods. So it's not like you have 5 homework assignments every week. You have 3 homework assignments every week. And so for Math 1, my expectation would be, uh, an hour or less on the assignments. Honestly, I haven't done the assignments with students like front to back in that way to know exactly how much time they all spend. But it shouldn't be a massive amount of time. But it should be, I would say, at least half an hour to really do it in a fulsome way and correct it in a fulsome way. But I would think some kids. So that's 3 assignments a week. We don't collect homework on after the weekend. We don't do weekend homework for Math 1. Whereas we do for the honors track. For the honors track, that's a totally different beast. Based on my son's experience, I would say, you know, on average, an hour or so per day for like the 5-day week. So that's why I say several hours. Like I would bank on having 5+ hours, depending on how much you really want to like make sure you get every single thing from every single problem. It's a very significant amount of work. That's what I keep trying to emphasize on the Math 1, 2 path. It is a lot of work. It's a big adjustment, but you get time to get that to make that adjustment. Don't worry if it feels like a lot at first. You can find your groove, just like my son did. When will students know if they are eligible for Math 1, 2? So we still have to get the grades from their Math 8 classes and do the MDTP. The MDTP will happen in April, but their class grades may not be available until like with reasonable predictability until like late April. So generally speaking, we don't figure out those exact numbers until later in April or maybe even earlier on in May. This year's AMC8 passing grade is really high. Was it set up to reduce the number? I haven't announced the AMC8 passing grade yet, so I don't know how you know that the passing grade is really high. But what I will say is I expect that the passing grade or the threshold will be higher this year, but it's because the test was easier. The average score on this year's AMC was the highest that it has ever been, and it's the highest. It's over a point higher than anything else in the past like 10 years, and it is 2.7 or so points higher than the test we used for last year's class. So yes, it was an easier test, and we will need to have a higher threshold as a result. It will not be done to like reduce the number of students. We don't decide these thresholds based on how many students we think should get in. We decide them based on what data we have. So last year we had all of them take it, but we also had a bunch of people here take it, including all the Math 1, 2 students. We had the Math 1, 2 students volunteer to take this year's AMC8 after the students took it because I wanted their data as well. The lowest any of them got out of the first 15 was 10. Most of them were getting 11 and 12 out of the first 15. So which is substantially higher than it was last year. So yes, it will likely be higher, but it will be based on the data that we have, not based on trying to like backfill some particular number. Also, there's 3 different tests and you only have to do 2 out of the 3. So it's not really possible for us to figure out exactly what those numbers would be. And honestly, I would like to have a little bit more than 51 kids, honestly, if we could. My kid did 45 minutes. Okay. More on the weekends. Yeah. Math 1 plus and Math 1 reflected differently on the transcript. No, because they're not a different class. So you'll be doing different tasks, but you will be enrolled in the same Math 1 class. 2 plus is different than Math 2 on a transcript. So is 3 plus and Math 3. But Math 1 and Math plus are part of the same class. They're part of the Math 1 class. Mr. D, please remember to drink more water. Yeah, I have not. I definitely am like losing my voice a little bit only because I didn't bring water with me back to the school. That was my bad. Don't worry, I will stay hydrated. What was the average score on the AMC this year? The average score among all students who took the test was 11.7, I believe. It was in the high 11s versus some of the ones that we did, or the ones that we did used for last year's class. The average was closer to 8. So it was just, I mean, having taken it myself as well, it was an easier test. There were easier questions, especially early on. So that was just the reality. And it is almost 8:30, and I have gotten through all of the questions. There are some private messages, which I then have to read myself before I like totally end this thing, so that'll be awkward. But so feel free to log out. I am staying so I can read the other messages. But I really appreciate you making the time to be here. I hope that this was helpful. I would love to do this in future years. So if you did feel like it was helpful, please let me know, and also please let other families know. My kid is in 7th grade, so I would love to talk to him and all of his classmates next year. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm appreciating everything that you're saying, and now I'm going back and looking at the private messages. The average you're talking about for the AMC, no, that was for the whole test. The average for the whole test was 11.74. So we're not setting the cutoff at 11 out of the first 15. That would be 4 points higher than last year, and nothing justifies that. All right, I am going to stop the recording. I've now read the messages. Thank you again, everyone.